eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, two F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace. The organization has since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence of a safe intake process. More than 30 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us in the fight for transparency at safeaerospace.org. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks. Sometimes these reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
Mr. Rush.
Mr. Chairman, ranking members and congressmen, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue, and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's briefing staff, which included the coordination of the presidential daily brief and supporting variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressman, Congresswoman. I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that's been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 till Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces
This
with
guy
Tom DeLonge,
claims
Chris
to have
Mellon,
seen
Steve Justice, and others
alien
to form Two Stars
bodies.
Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Keane, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times. And it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where they from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it, not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that could undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged WAVE programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate. And this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this
2004
technology,
that
it needs to have
was.
oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know it's very difficult for all of you, all you've done in the past to try to illuminate this issue. Call on myself first for some questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Graves. Are pilots that you interact with as part of your organization, do you feel adequately trained and briefed on how to handle encounters with UAPs?
No. Right
No.
now,
Duh.
military witnesses to
Who does?
UAP have limited options for reporting UAP. But more concerning is that commercial aviation sector has not adapted to the lessons that the military has implemented. The military and Department of Defense has stated that UAP represent a critical aviation safety risk. We have not seen that same language being used in the commercial markets. They are not acknowledging this risk.
Okay, what steps do you think you have to be taken to improve a pilot's UAP reporting, be it military or commercial?
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs. There is a fear that the stigma associated with this topic is going to lead to professional repercussions, either through management or perhaps through their yearly physical check.
It's a
So
good
having a
start.
secure system, reducing the stigma, and making this information available through the public is going to reduce the concerns that aircrew have.
Could you just give me a little idea of the degree to which reports in the past are not made public right now?
Well, I don't think there has been a proper reporting system to gather those reports and thus not report them. So to answer your question, I think there is a dearth of data due to the fact that the reporting has been limited up to this time.
Could you tell me why you believe it's, kind of to play the devil's advocate, a reason why some of this stuff should not be available to the public?
There's certainly some national security concerns when we use our advanced sensors in our tactical jets to be able to identify these objects. However, there's no reason that the objects themselves would be classified. I would be curious to see how the security classification guideline actually spells out the different nuances of how this topic is classified from the perspective of UAP, not national security.
I'll give you a follow-up on that. Assuming that there are reasons why not all this should be made public, this has been around for a long period of time. Can any of the three of you think of any reason why anything related to UAPs, say 15 years and back, should not be immediately made public?
I think one of it is acknowledging a vulnerability, both from a collection and I'll just say a countermeasure perspective. So it's
We'll go with say,
that we haven't cracked for many years. Yeah.
even say 20 years back. Is there any reason why when you go back that far, things shouldn't be made public?
Unless it shows a specific national security
I'll go back to
vulnerability
the
as it
50s.
relates to a weakness in
Okay.
a particular defense system.
Oh, okay, Mr. Fravor, the TikTok incident that that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
He's been holding this in for
None.
10
We had a
years.
standard debrief where the backseaters went down to our carrier intel center and briefed what had happened. And that was it. No one else talked to us. And I was in the top 20 in the battle group. No one came. The captain was aware, the admiral was aware, nothing was done.
Your commanding officers provide any sort of justification?
No, because I was the commanding officer of the
Okay.
squadron, so no.
Was this incident the only UAP event that you encountered while you were a pilot?
Yes, it was.
Okay. This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Okay. You two?
Well, I would also like to add, from a commercial aviation and military aviation perspective, we deal with uncertainty in our operating space as a matter of our professional actions. Identifying friend from foe is very important to us. And so when we have unidentified targets and we continue to ignore those due to a stigma or a fear of what it could be, that's an opening that our adversaries can take advantage of.
What steps should be taken to better understand and respond to UAP encounters in the interest of national security?
There needs to be a location where this information is centralized for processing, and there needs to be a two-way communication loop so the operators on the front end have a feedback and can get best practices on how to process information, what to do, and to ensure that their reporting is being listened to. Right now,
Okay.
there is not a lot of back and forth.
Mr. Grush, in your complaint to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, you claim that you believe information is being hidden. What kind of information do you think was hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in unclassified manner. As you know, the preponderance of my complaint was classified to the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAPs, but not sharing it with, intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots, that kind of information. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll go to Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for your service and for testifying today. Want to just talk about the UAPs as it relates to what we're seeing in the pilots' interaction with UAPs. Particularly, Mr. Graves, one of the, I think, concerns that for members of this committee is this idea that pilots, there's no system to actually report UAPs and the stigma around pilots. And so can you just briefly, you mentioned that you're working with 30 pilots right now that have had encounters with UAPs, but you've also, I believe, discussed and know of many more pilots. This is just those that you're currently working with. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I'll break that down in two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating.
I'll speed it up a little bit to catch up, but this is what worries me. They're like very, very focused on national security, which makes sense, right? They're aliens. They clearly have better technology if they can come here. But like, why would they be concerned about them posing a threat to us if they're claiming that they've known about their whereabouts for so many years now, decades long, and they've been of no harm or threat to us? I just don't trust the government and just humanity as a whole. I just feel like if they start admitting that, yeah, there's aliens and UFOs or whatever they're calling them now, UAPs, like, I just feel like they're going to come at them in a very aggressive kind of way instead of just like a observation or, I don't know. I just don't trust our people in charge to handle this in a peaceful manner.
That information with their other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal firsthand experience at the time. Since then, as I've engaged this topic, others have reached out to me to share their experiences, both on the military side as well as the commercial aviation side. On the military aviation side, veterans that have recently got out have shared their stories and have expressed how the objects we were seeing in 2014, 2015 continued all the way to 2019, 2020, and beyond. And so it became a generational issue for naval aviators on the Eastern Seaboard. This was something we were briefing to new students. This is something that was included in a notice to airmen to ensure that there was no accidents. And now with commercial aviators, they're reaching out because they're having somewhat similar experiences as our military brothers and sisters, but they do not have any reporting system that they can send us to.
And let me just add to, and both to Mr. Fravor as well as Mr. Graves, not having the system for reporting, would you both agree that is harmful to not just our national security interests, but to understand this phenomenon of what's happening with UAPs?
I think it's actually a travesty that we don't have a system to correlate this and actually investigate. So if you took the East Coast, there's coastal radars out there that monitor our air defense identification zone, so out to 200 miles. They can track these, so when you see them, they could actually go and pull that data and get maneuvering. And instead of just having the airplanes, there's other data sources out there. And I've talked to other government officials on this. So you need a centrally located repository that these reports go to. So if you just stuck it in DOD, you wouldn't get anything out of the Intelligence Committee because they have a tendency to not to talk. But if you had a central location where these reports would come in, not just military, but also commercial aviation, because there's a lot of that going on, especially if you talk to anyone that flies from here to Hawaii, over the Pacific, they see odd lights. So I think you need to develop something that allows you a central point to collect the data in order to investigate.
Mr. Graves?
I would concur with everything Mr. Fravor said. I'll continue to say that the commercial pilots that have reached out to me through Americans for Safe Aerospace are doing so because they don't feel there's another way for them to report this safety issue.
And I think one of the clear outcomes of this hearing already is that there has to be a safe and transparent reporting process for pilots, both on the commercial side and the military side, to be able to report UAPs in a way that's also transparent, but also understands the scope of our national security interests and what may be classified or not. But I think there has to be some sort of system. And so that's something that I hope can be an outcome.
You would think that being a part of like the national security, flight people, aviation, like national security people, part of your job would be reporting unidentifiable flying objects and technology in the sky. But no, they'll fire you if you do that. Like that's part of the security. So stupid.
That this committee can.
This is how I
work on.
know they don't care about our safety.
Is there anything else for just for the two of you briefly beyond this reporting
Shit
system
like
that you think
this.
we can do as a government to encourage and facilitate more civilian reporting? On the
We're doing it
civilian-
right now.
Okay,
I
great.
think this hearing is going to show the American people that their government takes this topic seriously.
And how about civilians that may not be pilots? What kind of process could be in place for civilians who are not pilots, who may have UAP encounters? Do either of you have any suggestions that could facilitate that?
My recommendations would be to make that a sensor-centric operation in order to make it as objective as possible.
Okay, sir, Mr. Fravor?
No, I agree with Mr. Graves on that.
Okay.
That's a tough one.
Just briefly, I also just want to note, particularly for the two pilots, another question for Mr. Grush.
That's
One
like
of the things that I
having
found
a,
fascinating in our discussion, Mr. Graves, last night as
hotline
well, is
for
that
like
you
a
both described
open crime
UAPs and
investigation.
formations and the way they are observed in space or in our air, and the way that they
tip
move
line.
is essentially ways in which current technology or aircraft that we know of are unable to actually function or move. And so will you just, for the public record, again, once again, just briefly, just either describe or note that aircraft that are being witnessed, particularly by the 30 folks that you're working with, are essentially outside the scope of anything that we know of today and the technology we have today. Mr. Graves, Mr. Fravor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. And that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours and go back up.
Thank you. My last question, and sometimes I know that you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the
Tell
intelligence
us.
committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge
Tell us.
provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I think that these questions are important questions, and I look forward to being involved in the process to get those answered. I know there'll be a lot of
Where
questions
are
from the committee members, so I
they?
yield back.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Burchett himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Guys,
Thank you,
they're
Darcy. I would
testifying
like to have you on the
about
legislation to
seeing
do just that. on the
actual
reporting.
alien
We'll
bodies.
Get together on that. Maybe you can be my co-sponsor on that.
Not
That'd be really
just
cool. Thank you. Those are great
spacecraft, but
questions.
pilots,
Um,
alien pilots,
Mr. Graves,
dead ones.
again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's 0 airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic
were
speed,
in a
1.1,
hurricane?
1.2 Mach. And they would do so in very
Which is
erratic
where
and
they were in the
incorrect behaviors
atmosphere.
that I don't have an explanation for.
Okay. Have you spoken to commercial and military pilots that have seen these off of our East Coast? Mr. Favor,
Oh, I'm
I
on the
noticed
East
that
Coast.
in the Tic Tac video, it's Tic Tac like the candy, not TikTok like.
I
the
was just
Chinese
about to
Communist
say,
guy.
so many people kept
Ah,
calling
that's
them
correct.
TikTok.
Yes, sir. I just want to make
the
that
TikTok video.
because my daughter
That was pissing me
corrected me
off
on that and
too.
called me a boomer and
Thank
hey boomer,
you.
and I said no, baby, it's Tic Tac like the candy. You're gonna have to just look it up. And and I would also like to say today is a day of many firsts. It's a
That's funny, I was just
miracle that
thinking
we're
that.
having this meeting, and it's also a miracle that my wife has put up with me for 9 years today. Today is my anniversary, so I want to tell my wife happy anniversary. And that I love her very much.
Aww.
As she
so
likes to say,
cute.
this 9 years have been the best 2 years of her life. So, thank you.
I don't
Mr.
know what that
Faber,
means, but happy
what
anniversary.
astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac? Very briefly.
The performance, absolute performance. It was,
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has in this world that has those capabilities.
no, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
Are you aware of any other reconnaissance platforms that have tracked or recorded the Tic Tac's maneuvers, maybe the NORAD system or any of the others?
I am not.
Okay. Mr. Grush, thank you for being here, brother. Thank you all very much. Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything
Did not know what TikToks
along these
are.
lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's
Wow.
very unfortunate. As they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who've been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or
Wonder
conceal these
who?
extraterrestrial technology?
Civilians,
Yes.
government agents.
Personally,
Who's
Have you
coming
heard,
after
have
him?
anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could.
That's a
get in
yes. That's a fucking
confidential
yes.
area skiff, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were
Oh,
doing
shit,
directed
hold
what
on.
you know of
Personally,
technology.
yes.
Bill, do you have any personal knowledge of people who've been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally,
Have you heard, have anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential area skiff, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the skiff.
Holy shit.
And that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
That's a yes, people, just in case.
Mr. Favor,
Yeah, catch
do you
on to that.
believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the whitewater, and when we turned around, it was gone. So there was something there that obviously moved.
Yo,
Okay,
this
it was
is
not the same object though
wild.
that you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the whitewater disappeared.
We were in another instance, we're told about the capabilities of a jamming during viewing of when there were some people chasing some of these objects. Did you experience any of that jamming or interrupting your radar or weapons system?
My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar, which was what we had on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the APG-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything you could do, range, velocity, aspect, and then it spit the lock, and the targeting pod is passive. That's what we were able to get the video on.
I'm about to run out of time, but are you aware of any of our enemies that have that capability?
No.
Okay, I would also like to note for the record that like George Knapp breaking Area 51, he's the reason I knew about that. And the reason I know about the Tic Tacs is Leslie Keene from New York Times article, and I would encourage everybody to read that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I
You'll
like
back
this
in
guy.
no time.
Very
Giving
good.
credit
Mr.
where
Aston?
credit's due.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Exposing
Graves,
murders.
you reported UAP encounters during training
They
flights. I
literally
think,
just said
and have since come forward to warn the Pentagon
that they know of
that
people who have been
these encounters may
murdered
be putting pilots at risk.
for knowing this
Um,
information.
My first question is, you've identified these as taking place on the East Coast. Is it just on the East Coast where these encounters have been reported?
No, since the events initially occurred, I've learned that the objects have been detected essentially where all operations, Navy operations are being conducted across the world. And that's from the Ultimate Anomaly Resolutions Office reporting.
All right, can you describe your experience after you decided to come forward
Across the world.
go public with
I mean,
your
I'm not
experience?
surprised. I'm
Certainly.
just surprised
Like
that
many
it's
others, in
happening on
2017, I saw the
television.
New York Times article come out as well. And for me, it was special because I recognized the voices on the video. I recognized the video itself. I had seen it when it was taken. I seen it when it was debriefed. And so that was kind of shook me because I realized that this problem was still ongoing. And so I reached out to colleagues back on the East Coast and realized that this was still a safety risk that they were dealing with. That they had essentially hit a wall with how they could move forward on this conversation. It was at that point when I decided to try to move the conversation forward myself.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots? And can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes,
Yeah.
inside of a clear sphere, where the apex or tips of the cube were
Give me
touching
one
the
second,
inside of that
sorry.
sphere. And that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. And that occurred over almost 8 years. And as far as I know, it's still occurring.
Holy shit.
So I take it that you're arguing what we need is real transparency in a reporting system so we can get some clarity on what's going on out there, because there are many pilots in your situation, but we should have a way of developing a systematic inventory of all of such encounters. Is that right?
Yes, and I
Right,
think we
so that
need
the
both
aviation
transparency and the
security can
reporting. We have the reporting, but we
report
need to make sure that
insecurity.
information can be promulgated to commercial aviation as well as the rest of the populace.
Mr. Grush, what about you? What was your experience
Might
after
be
you
helpful.
came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so. So I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers
it's
and
not
actually superiors of
civilians, it's
mine over the last 3 years.
inside.
How do you
job.
account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially, the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people. So.
Mr. Fravor, what about you? What has your experience been since you've come forward with your perspective on this?
Actually, I've been treated very well. And the
I wonder
6
what
people
other
that were
like
involved, myself
space
included,
agencies
all of them have or will be retiring from the military as
besides
05s or 06s.
NASA
And all my
say
friends that
about
are
the
very senior, 3 and 4 stars, I've talked to them. They believe, they understand there's a problem. But no, I was actually treated really well.
And what is your general interpretation of these phenomena, or what is your current thinking of trying to make sense of them?
Well, I'll say, I'm not like a UFO fanatic. It's not me. But I will tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, there's nothing, we have nothing close to it. It was amazing to see. I told my buddy I wanted to fly it, but yeah, it's just an incredible technology.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'll yield back to you.
Thanks. On to Ms. Luna.
Mr. Grush, in speaking to you yesterday, I just wanted to follow up on Representative Raskin's questions. In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life to put in perspective if they were really not scared about this information coming out. Why would someone be intimidated like that? To your knowledge, are NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have data on that. I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of Aero, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over Aero in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Unfortunately, I cannot read his mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of Aero.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review. And I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that though mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you. So it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail. My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Ooh, this is gonna be
Certainly.
juicy.
In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting
Aggressive
off.
behaviors.
And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and/or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Oh shit.
Okay, and
I
then
think I've heard
another
of
question
that.
on follow-up referencing the gimbal video Go Fast incident. Can you just clarify,
think I've heard
because
of
to
that
our
incident.
understanding, the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that
The
video, just
size
for
of a
those
football
Americans specifically
field.
there that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly, there was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Okay, and follow-up, in regards to the reporting procedures that Mr. Garcia had addressed on, as well as Representative Burchett, with the FAA, to your understanding, pilots that are seeing this, commercial airline pilots, are they receiving cease and desist letters from corporations for coming forward with information in regards to safety for potential airline passengers?
I have been made privy to conversations with commercial aviators who have received cease and desist orders.
So the American public should know that corporations are putting their own reputations on the basic, not the line, but ahead of the safety of the American people. And I think, would you agree with that statement?
It appears so.
Okay. And I guess this would be my last, oh, I'm out of time. I yield. I'll be back.
Good. Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, let's talk about the laws of physics for a second. Mr. Graves and Commander Favor, I heard you talk about speed. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
I was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
Do you want to go ahead?
I didn't have the detail to be able to tell that.
So we got within a half mile of Tic Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows. Although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs, yeah.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say that they're above congressional oversight, what do you mean?
Complicated question. So there's, some, I would call it abuse here. So congressional oversight of conventional special access programs. So I'll use Title 10, so DOD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional oversight of SAPs, discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting. However, the Gang of Eight is at least supposed to be notified if a waived or waive bigoted unacknowledged SAP is created, and that's public law.
Well, so that how does, I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but
Yeah.
how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
Does that mean
self-fund.
that there is money in the budget that is said to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
Okay. Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place,
Writing
some
that
that
down.
we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course, I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
Okay. I'll yield the balance of my time back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Guys, this is crazy.
Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Garouche, in your sworn testimony, you state that the United States government has retrieved supposedly extraterrestrial spacecraft and other UAP-related artifacts. You go so far as to state
And
that the U.S. is in
bodies.
possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors. Several other former military and intelligence officials have come forward with similar allegations, albeit in non-public settings. However, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office. To your knowledge, is that statement correct?
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to Arrow thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to Arrow that I also interviewed,
Okay.
and I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
Okay,
I was able to evaluate
okay,
that
I
information.
need to go on.
Sure.
But my understanding that his statement is
She is
accurate,
taking her time very seriously.
came from a direct quote.
It's valuable.
And this contradiction is a perfect example of why we need to inject transparency into our government. And for another example, look no further than the pitiful response to the Chinese spy balloon debacle earlier this year.
For real.
You
We
may
can't even
remember
get a
the mass
fucking
confusion
spy
that ensued
balloon.
when the balloon was first spotted over Montana,
Yeah, an
4 days
alien.
after it first entered U.S. airspace over Alaska. The Biden administration's initial inability to address the object grew into a continuous series of embarrassments. After news of the balloon reached the mainstream media, we were assured that the balloon posed no threat to our security. However, after the balloon
It
was
flew
allowed
over
to
like
transit the
5
entire
military
continental
bases.
United States, fighter jets were scrambled off the coast of South Carolina to shoot it down. This flip-flopping and obfuscation caused needless confusion, fear, and panic across the country. It's my hope, Mr. Chairman, that this sort of confusion will not be repeated. We should investigate the extent to which elements of our government possess or do not possess information that is of critical value to the American people. We owe it to the citizens of this nation to make sure that our government is transparent and accountable. We must make sure that
It's
our
never
government
going to
provides
be.
answers, and Congress must do its duty to solicit those answers.
It's never
With
going
that,
to be.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2022,
I wouldn't be surprised
NASA announced that it was commissioning an
if
independent
the
study team to examine
higher
UAPs.
ups
The
are
NASA
fucking
team is
aliens.
comprised of scientists across different fields, as well as former astronauts and pilots. In May, the independent study team held that its first public meeting, which included the perspectives from NASA senior leaders, as well as perspectives from the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies. The NASA study team is also expected to release its first report pretty soon, and I think it's safe to say that we all eagerly await its results. Mr. Graves, how might NASA's
Now they're saying
research
something.
influence the commercial industry regarding safety in UAP?
I think NASA has a big role to play as far as commercial aviation safety, and it's one of their original charges as an organization. One of the recommendations that have been put forward is to utilize their existing aviation safety reporting system to serve as a short-term fill and trusted platform for pilots that want to report on UAP. It also has built-in analytics capability and is funded by Congress.
Gotcha. And also, Mr. Graves, are there any other industries that may be influenced by the NASA research on UAPs? And if so, how so?
Well, I think there is a large swath of commercial capabilities that could be brought to bear on this topic, from space-based or ground-based sensor systems that are available open source or through commercial marketplaces. And I think NASA's work, as they work to identify and highlight specific parameters that can be found, we can take that information and promulgate this through the public sector so that we can have more open conversation about what we're seeing.
You know, in 2020, the Department of Defense released several videos of UAPs, including Mr. Freyr's experience, U.S. Navy pilots that recorded footage. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary report on UAP events. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson stated that NASA would begin to investigate these events. In fact, I sit on Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and when we were doing a hearing with the NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, I asked, why NASA needed to be fully funded. And there were many great reasons, but one of them was actually had to do with UAPs. He actually mentioned, is there life out there? I don't know. And so either way, these actions ultimately led NASA to assemble the independent study team that I mentioned earlier. Also in 2021, Harvard University stood up the Galileo project to research and examine the origins of UAP. So it seems like both, from NASA and in the higher education community, because of the work that y'all have done and people standing up, I think we're seeing some of that stigma slowly going away. Mr. Freyer, do you believe that military pilots feeling empowered to share their UAP experiences has directly impacted the scientific community's research goals on this topic?
I would say yes. I would say that, starting in 2017, when it actually came out, it took that stigma away. I mean, I've talked to multiple senators who said prior to that, if you'd have mentioned UAP, you'd have been laughed off the hill. And now we're sitting here today for a public testimony on what's actually going on. I'm hoping that this curve will be more of an exponential and we'll get more and more transparent to the level that we can.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's important. I couldn't imagine, I'm not a pilot, but I used to fly gliders in Civil Air Patrol. Huh? Yeah, yeah.
Pilot?
And so either way, I mean, I couldn't imagine, being in the glider and seeing something, and then not feeling like I had the agency to talk about it. Mr. Graves, can you discuss the importance of seeking scientists to sit on your advisory board?
Absolutely. I think ultimately this is going to be a scientific problem. And not only that, it's also an engineering problem. I've been working with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics to help them stand up a UAP integration committee to help integrate their engineering prowess into this problem. And so, yes, very much, I think this is an engineering and scientific problem as much as a national security problem.
And how might Congress help to facilitate partnerships between the scientific community and the UAP focus groups within government?
Well, I think one of the things they can do is to have these types of hearings to communicate to the public that this is a topic of interest. I think that there is a pseudo market, if you will, of interested capabilities and talent that want to approach this topic. And we're seeing that start to grow now. So I think continued conversation, reduction of stigma is going to allow that to flourish and allow answers to help generate themselves.
100%. Well, thank you all for being here and thank you for your work. I think it's important that we keep our top scientific minds focused on this issue and look for ways to increase collaboration. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Mr. Comer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say I want to thank you for having this hearing, and I want to thank Mr. Burchett, Ms. Luna for leading this hearing. And with that, I yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct this, I believe, to Mr. Grush, but if any of you all feel like you need to jump in, just jump right in. We're good. Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of this crash retrieval, some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress talked about we're going to go to Area 51 and, and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just, and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up, but please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in a SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right. When do you think those programs began, and who authorized them?
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly because since
All
This
right.
guy wants
If any of y'all wanna
names.
Jump in on any of this, you're more than welcome to. What level of security clearance is required to fully access these programs?
well, anybody who has
And I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin. So please go right ahead.
certainly difference between member access and say somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the access adjudicative authority should be able to grant you access. Yeah.
Mr. Burchett, if you'll yield, so just to put a fine point on that, there's nothing that you're aware of that's above special access program classification.
It's a misnomer that there's anything actually above top secret. Executive Order 13526 delineates the classification levels.
Right. But I draw a point on that because we can have access to those programs. And so the notion that we're not being given that access sort of defies our typical muscle memory here in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Burchett. I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Along those lines, Title 10, you may not know this or not, but Title 10 and Title 50 authorization, they seem to say they're inefficient. So who gets to decide this, in your opinion, in the past?
It's a group of career senior executive officials,
Okay, are they government officials?
both
Or-
in and out,
Do what?
both in and out of government, and that's about as far
I
as I
got
can
you.
go there.
All
Yeah.
right, well, that leads to my next question. Which private corporations are directly involved in this program? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs, to your knowledge? I mean, we know we audit the Pentagon every year, and I've been here 5 years and they failed the dadgum thing every year. This
guy's not happy
a year,
with
we
the
think. And
government.
I was told Department of Defense, maybe 60% of their assets are unaccounted for, whatever the heck that means. In the public sector, you go to jail for that kind of crap. So tell me.
Yeah, I know when I'm $1 off of my DTS travel voucher, I get hammered, but it seems like it doesn't work the other
If
way,
you
right?
sell over
Yeah.
if you sell over $600 worth of stuff on eBay, now you get a call from the IRS. So please, what corporations?
Yeah, I don't know the specific metrics towards the end of your question. The specific corporations I did provide to the committees in specific divisions, and I spent 11 and a half hours with both Intel committees. So.
Okay, has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
This guy is
Okay, I've been told to ask you what that is and how to get it in the record.
Which
What have you stated publicly in your interviews for the congressional record?
if you reference my News Nation interview and I talk about a multi-decade, campaign to disenfranchise public interest,
Sorry, Mr.
Basically.
Chairman, I've gone.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
apologize, Mr. Chairman. I yield back negative 21 seconds.
Thank you. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for coming here today. I do concur with the ranking member as well as several other members here on this committee that this is a committee for whistleblowers and for the protection of whistleblowers as well. So we understand what you're putting on the table here and what you're putting on the line here, and we thank you for that. Mr. Grush, you sat on the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Task Force created in the 2020 NDAA, correct?
Yes.
There have been some things that have been mentioned here during this hearing that I wanted to pick up on. Mr. Graves, you mentioned specifically during the answers to one of your questions, you named Boeing contractors being engaged in an incident regarding this red cube about a football field wide. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the interaction, or Mr. Grush, either of you, the interactions between defense contractor companies and any UAP-related programs or activities.
So I'll just say that the information about the contractor himself were provided by a witness, and I have no particular detail in
Understood.
that relationship.
Mr. Grush?
The kind of general unclass wave tops, certainly the contractors, are the metal benders, so to speak. They're the ones actually doing specific performance on government contracts.
Are they required to issue any disclosure regarding UAP sightings, or do they engage in any reporting around this?
In terms of the contractors,
Yes.
not that I'm aware of.
They do not. Okay. Now, when it comes to notification that you had mentioned about IRAD programs, we have seen defense contractors abuse their contracts before through this committee. I have seen it personally, and I have also seen the notification requirements to Congress abused. I am wondering, one of the loopholes that we see in the law is that there is, at least from my vantage point, is that depending on what we're seeing, is that there are no actual definitions or requirements for notification. What methods of notification did you observe? Like when they say they notified Congress, how did they do that? Do you have insight into that?
For certain IRAD activities, I can only think of ones conventional in nature. Sometimes they flow through certain, I'll just say SAP programs that have cognizant authority over the Air Force or something. And those are congressionally reported compartments, but IRAD is literally internal to the contractor. So as long as it's money, either profits, private investment, et cetera, they can do whatever they want.
To put a finer point on it, when there is a requirement for any agency or company to notify Congress, do they contact the chairman of a committee? Do they get them on the phone specifically? Is this through an email to hypothetically a dead email box?
A lot of it comes through what they call the PPR, Periodic Program Review process. If it's a SAP or Controlled Access Program Equity, and then those go to the specific committees, whether it be the SAS,
Okay.
CASC, HISI.
Thank you. I apologize. My time is limited. Mr. Graves, one of your main concerns is that the FAA currently does not have an official process to receive reports of UAP from pilots or others, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience, what data should the Aero program prioritize for potential collection? We have, location, date, time, but are there other specific characteristics that should be included in these reports?
Certainly. I think that there's two categories that would be important. One would be kinematics and understanding the specifics of how the vehicle or objects are moving. And the second would be a more zoomed out approach of being able to look at origin and destination before the incident, as well as getting a better contextual understanding of how these objects are interacting with each other.
Thank you. Now, because I only have a minute left, I apologize, we only have 5 minutes today, but for the record, if you were me, where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions, if you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the three of you.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
I would say, and I've told people that you have to know where to look. They're not going to divulge it to you because of the classification levels. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is exactly what Mr. Grush can point you, then you have them.
Okay. Mr. Graves?
I was an operator, so I was depending on folks like Mr. Garage to do that homework.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back to the chair.
Mr. Biggs?
This
Thanks,
is so
Mr. Chairman. I thank the
interesting.
witnesses for being here today. I'm over here.
Sorry, I'm Googling
Thank you so
stuff
much
while
for
I'm
being here.
going through this. Oh shit, can you guys not? Oh my God, I'm
I
so
want to get
sorry.
into
I suck. I'm
specifics
so
here.
sorry, everybody.
And the
All-
reason
all
I'm
like
going
one
to
of
go this
you.
way is because you've talked a bit about what I would call misdirection by official U.S. government with regard to UAPs, right? And so I'm going to get to that in a second. But last week, White House NSC spokesman John Kirby stated that UAPs are having an impact on our training ranges and need to be treated as a legitimate issue. Do you concur with his statements? That's for each of you.
Yes.
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 Okay. Now, having said that, I'm going to take you to specific instances around the Phoenix Valley, because that's where I live. In '97, we had the famous Phoenix Light case. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. There were two things that went along with that, and the explanation was military training range off Luke and the Barry Goldwater range. Do you know anything different other than the official explanation of those lights?
Only what's in the public vernacular about it. That was outside the scope of my duties.
And if we wanted to, just my question along with my colleague from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, if we wanted to find out more about that, where would we go to find the files, and who would we address? And are you going to tell me we need to go to a SCIF so you can tell us in a SCIF?
I could potentially give you a vector on that. That specific case, I'm familiar with it in terms of public, but I give you a vector in closed environment, yeah.
That would be good. Thank you. So if it's true that UAPs are having an impact on training ranges, and this administration considers it to be a legitimate issue, what steps can Congress take to address training range impacts? And I say that having two very large training ranges in my state. And so we'll start with Mr. Graves and going down the panel.
Some of the initial procedures have been implemented, such as within the United States Navy, that have a range failure report that gathers information from pilots. I understand that a service-wide reporting mechanism is still pending. However, that would be a great next step, not only for gathering information, but for showing the troops that it is an acceptable topic and reducing the stigma.
Okay, please, all of you continue.
Yeah, as a recipient of a lot of those training range reports, sometimes we only get contextual kind of oral reporting. It'd be nice if they attached all sensor data and there's a system in place that can handle multiple classifications of data. And that's an issue with the F-35, right? That jet was never built to be an ISR platform. And it's a pain in the, we'll just say butt, to get that data off, so. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with the previous two, being a user of those training ranges, that the data has to be out there. You have to acknowledge that you're seeing them, and then you have to collect the data. Right now, you get the report, someone says, I saw something, but no one collects the radar data to back it up and do research.
Okay. Do you believe that the 2019 classification guidelines for UAPs interferes with the federal government's ability to be transparent with the American people? And do you think we need to be more transparent with the American people? All of you, yeah.
I'll say yes to that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with at least the UAP Task Force 2019 Security Classification Guide. I think it's fair. I did actually help author that with the.
Uh-oh,
director
you
at the
got a
time.
bias that
Yeah,
way then.
but I will say, I'll call it a lazy attitude about declassifying videos. I mean, I've seen some of the videos of the recent shoot down, and I saw no reason that couldn't have been released as long as they mask, some data. The American people deserve to see that imagery and full motion video.
I would think, well, in my opinion, I will say things are overclassified. I know for a fact the video or the pictures that came out in the 2020 report that had the stuff off the East Coast, they were taken with an iPhone off the East Coast. A buddy of mine was one of the senior people there, and he said they were originally classified at TSSCI. And my question to him was, what's TSSCI about these? They're an iPhone literally off the vacapes. That's not TSSCI. So they're overclassified, and as soon as they do that, they go in a vault, and then you all have to look for them.
Yeah, so with the overclassification, that may be one way. Are there other ways that the DoD or intelligence agencies are keeping this information from the American people or even from Congress?
I think part of that has been not encouraging reporting. If the problem is not something that can be measured, it's not something that's going to be fixed.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm out of time, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
First of all, without objection, Representative Nick Langworthy of New York has waived on the subcommittee for purpose of questioning witnesses at today's subcommittee hearing. And then we go to Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you guys coming out today, testifying. Look, I've been here for 6 months, and I'm pretty skeptical. I don't trust anything in this town. And so I think that's because I'm from Missouri. You've got to show me, right? With that being said, there's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Grush, and so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity.
By UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans?
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Okay.
What the
One of my constituents
fuck?
actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, and so with that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me and it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring.
Only a
theory.
theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Occam's razor is that these aircraft, have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military and contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am witting of, so.
Would it be safe to say that there could be a scenario today where you have an aircraft that crashes and because it's been involved in one program from one federal agency, but the agency that retrieves it is not aware of that program, and to them it appears alien in origin?
I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. I'm not aware of any historical situation that would match that you described. So
You're not aware, it has not happened that you're aware of?
that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down. He said
Sorry,
that
I've been
his
Googling
FLIR
shit, my
system
bad.
malfunctioned, and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Wait, so
Well, I
holy
think this goes
shit.
to that national security side, and you can go back
What
to the
he said
history
was
of
crazy. Him
things
and his
showing up
wife
in
saw
certain
something
areas and disabling our
disturbing
capabilities, which
that
is
the
disheartening.
extraterrestrials
And
have
for
done.
us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar and the aircraft when it tried to do it. And the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident.
I think it's a
The
pretty
recording
common
on the
sighting.
AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say. I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people. And that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some
I
obvious
feel
next
like if they're
steps.
telling us
Every person
this,
watching this knows
it's
that we
because
need
there's
to meet
something
Mr.
else they
Grush
know
in a secure,
bigger now.
compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that
just
do not put him in jeopardy
giving
and
us
that
what they
give us
can
the information we need. Second,
to
I would
shut us
suggest
up.
that the radar images from, that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more fulsome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here of the Fine Oversight Committee. I yield back.
Ms. Mace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to our witnesses who are testifying today. I want to thank each of you for being here to discuss a topic of grave importance to our national security. Earlier this year, a Chinese spy balloon was shot down off the coast of my home state of South Carolina. Since the Roswell incident in 1947, many Americans have wondered about the dangers of unknown objects crisscrossing our skies. Whether these are UAPs or weather phenomena, advanced technology from American allied or enemy forces, or something more out of this world. So my first question, I have several questions, and if we can just be quick on these first two, I'm going to ask each of you the same question, and then I'll get to each of you individually. The first one, when you reported your experiences with a UAP, did any of you face any repercussions with your superiors, yes or no?
No.
No. I've actually never seen anything personally, believe it or not. So.
All right. And then do you believe there's an active disinformation campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs? Yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that.
As previously stated publicly, yes.
I think previously with like Project Blue Book, yes, but currently I don't speak for the United States government.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions for Mr. Graves. What percentage of UAP sightings in your belief go unreported by our pilots?
This is an approximation based off of my personal experience speaking with a number of pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting perhaps.
So like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs.
That's just my personal estimate.
In the incident off Virginia Beach, do you believe the Navy took the danger to your aircraft seriously after it was reported?
Absolutely.
A few questions for Mr. Favor. As an expert naval aviator, have you ever seen an object that looked and moved like the Tic Tac UAP?
No.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand them, yes.
Many dismiss UAP reports as classified weapons testing by our own government, but in your experience as a pilot, does our government typically test advanced weapon systems right next to multi-million-dollar jets without informing our pilots?
No, we have test ranges for that.
It took over 15 years for your encounter with the Tic Tac to be declassified. Do you feel there was a good reason to prevent lawmakers from having access to this footage?
No, I just think it was ignored when it happened and it just sat somewhere in a file, never got reported.
In a drawer. It happens a lot up here. Shocker. Mr. Grush, a couple of questions for you too, sir, this morning. What percentage of UAPs do you feel are adequately investigated by the U.S. government of the 5% that are reported?
I can only speak for my personal leadership over at NGA. I tried to look at every report that came through that I could triage. So.
Do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that had more information that I'm not sure what they've shared with certain Gang of Eight members or et cetera, but certainly I would not be surprised.
Okay. You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Okay, so, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super, thank you, and I yield back.
I'm so jealous of these people. They are going to get all the inside info.
Mr. Langworthy is here. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for being here today. to discuss this very unique topic. And I'd like to jump right into my questions if you don't mind. Commander Fravor, can you briefly describe your background?
Yeah, I was an enlisted Marine, Naval Academy graduate, Navy, flew for 18 years, got a master's from University of Houston, and I've worked in the private sector for the last, 16 years, 17 years. I do a lot of defense work. So
Really gold-plated credentials. Commander Fravor, we have all seen the floating Tic Tac video that you engaged with on November 14th, 2004. Can you briefly talk about why you were off the coast of San Diego that day?
yeah, we were at a workup with all the battle groups. So we integrate the ships with the carrier, the air wing with the carrier, and we start working. So we were doing an air-to-air defense to hone not only our skills, but those of the USS Princeton when they had been tracking them for 2 weeks. The problem was that there was never manned aircraft airborne when they were tracking them. And this was the first day. And unfortunately, we were the ones airborne and went and saw it.
Do you remember the weather that day? Was it cloudy or windy or anything out of the ordinary on the Pacific coast?
It was actually, if you're familiar with
Is
San
this
Diego, it was a perfect day, light winds, no white caps, clear skies, not a cloud. It was for flying.
A repeat or something? Because I heard
Now,
this.
is it true that you saw, in your words, a 40-foot flying Tic Tac shaped object?
That's correct. Or for some people that can't know what a Tic Tac is, it's a giant flying propane tank.
Is this going on repeat? Because I've seen this already. Yeah, somebody else just commented this is repeated, bro. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm gonna go to. I'm gonna watch more of this. Let's Okay, so did they fool me? Is this not live? You assholes. Okay, all right, hold on a second. Give me 1 second. Okay, I guess this was 5 days ago, so I'm an idiot. Okay, so
Another poll found that nearly half Americans believe that the federal government is doing a very bad or somewhat bad job of dealing with reports of UFO sightings. As Representative Burchett just referenced on the FAA bill that just went through, you can tell that that's exactly happening. Considering the thousands of testimonies and videos taken on people's phones and eyewitnesses' accounts made by credible witnesses such as doctors, pilots, scientists, and active duty service members, it is unacceptable to continue to gaslight Americans into thinking that this is not happening or that the potential of intelligent life forms exist other than humans. Even more alarming is the fact that these eyewitnesses are many of times service members and have no assurance that their lives will not be negatively impacted or even harmed by their
all right,
experiences.
we'll start from the
In
beginning.
being an active duty service member working on an airfield, I've had conversations with many pilots where they were in fear of coming forward for retribution and or being taken off flight status. How do we know this? Because the government has said nothing to assure us otherwise. They have also did nothing to calm the concerns of over 20% of Americans who have reported to have seen UFOs or UAPs. We are simply told not to question the government and that the government has it under control. Today is the first hearing of its kind where we will attempt to get down to the bottom of what is actually happening with UAPs. But we will hear from people who have had personal sightings rather than Pentagon bureaucrats who have always been sent to stonewall our investigations. Just so that the press knows and the people know, we were even denied access to a classified briefing in a SCIF prior to this hearing due to the amount of hoops that we had to jump through to grant temporary clearance to witness Grush, who has knowledge of classified information. It is time to have an open-minded discussion on this topic, to hear the evidence and understand the magnitude of what this means, not just for our nation, but for humanity. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you and Mr. Burchett for bringing this topic to my attention. Now we'll recognize National Security Subcommittee Ranking Member Garcia for 10 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank first our witnesses for joining us today. I want to begin by thanking you all for your service to our country and for sharing your voices today and your courage to be here as well. To Mr. Graves, particularly grateful to you to spend some time that we had for you to share with candor some of your experiences, so I appreciate that as well. I do want to thank all the members of our subcommittee today and also those that are here and have waved on for their incredible interest in this issue, particularly to Congressman Burchett. I know that your leadership has brought us to this place today, and I want to thank you for that, as well as everyone else that's been engaged in this work. I also want to thank the oversight staff, who I know has been working very hard to ensure that today's hearing is serious, that it's transparent, and that it also provides appropriate answers, as our oversight body always demands. Now, it's really important that we're here in a bipartisan way. It's the UAPs. I think an open mind is absolutely the best. I want to yield the 2.5 minutes, the remainder of my time, to the representative from Florida, Representative Moskowitz.
Navy F-18 pilot with his own UAP experience. The next witness, David Grush.
Are they foreign adversaries? Are they U.S. technology? Are they something else? They ask themselves, more about Congress.
Lieutenant Graves is also a former U.S. Navy F-18 pilot with his own UAP experience. The next witness, David Grush, is a former senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and was a senior technical advisor for UAP issues. And finally, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, squadron leader who worked as a naval aviator for 18 years. Mr. Fravor has his own UAP experience, known as the TikTok event. I look forward to hearing from all three of you today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. We appreciate you all being here today and look forward to your testimony. I'll remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please try to limit your oral statements to 5 minutes As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, it'll turn yellow, and the red light, when that comes on, it tells you your 5 minutes have expired. I'll now recognize Mr. Graves for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, distinguished members of the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, Representatives Burchett and Luna. My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I'm a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
What the fuck?
Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace. The organization has since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence of a safe intake process. More than 30 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us in the fight for transparency at safeaerospace.org. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks. Sometimes these reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
Damn, this is intense.
Mr. Chairman, ranking members and congressmen, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue, and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years.
David Charles
both in the U.S.
Grush.
Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2025, or excuse me,
He's
2023.
probably done a lot of public
At the National
speaking.
Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD 19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP task force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's Briefing Staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressmen, Congresswomen. I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that's been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an unofficial official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Kean, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where they're from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it, not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that can undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged WAVE programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know it's very difficult for all of you, all you've done in the past to try to illuminate this issue. Call on myself first for some questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Graves. Are pilots that you interact with as part of your organization, do you feel adequately trained and briefed on how to handle encounters with UAPs?
No. Right now, military witnesses to UAP have limited options for reporting UAP. But more concerning is that commercial aviation sector has not adapted to the lessons that the military has implemented. The military and Department of Defense has stated that UAP represent a critical aviation safety risk. We have not seen that same language being used in the commercial markets. They are not acknowledging this risk.
Okay, What steps do you think have to be taken to improve a pilot's UAP reporting, be it military or commercial?
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs. There is a fear that the stigma associated with this topic is going to lead to professional repercussions, either through management or perhaps through their yearly physical check. So having a secure system, reducing the stigma, and making this available.
Okay, I think we watched most of this, so I want to check out some of their, what did he say? Hold on, let me.
This so the operators have the detail to be able to.
Okay, so, and you may or may not be able to intelligent extraterrestrials. And you probably can't
Yeah, I was,
believe we have
the way we understand them, yes. I think previous.
I would observe that perhaps cure that the
Mace?
security. These are yours. The questions with your superiors, yes or no?
No.
There's an active disinformation.
Personally, believe it or not.
No.
But DPs, yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that.
Thank you.
My personal experience speaking with a number of pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near.
Believe the Navy took the danger to your airplanes for Mr. Mike such a way that but in yours,
No, we have test ranges for that.
it took over 15 years for your encounter with the Tic Tac to be
Never got reported.
in a drawer.
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our.
You have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off your level of sentience. And then in terms of both, it derives itself from, that's the hall.
That's what's occurred. Is that these aircraft, would it be
a lot of our
program from one federal agency?
his radar went down. He said they made it about the fact.
We have,
And how should we think about Burchett and Congresswoman?
I want to find. Let me see. What interview was it? Um,
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, by
News Nation. There it is. Okay, cool. That's exactly what I was looking for. Okay.
Bombshell claims from a military whistleblower. UFO wreckage recovered by the U.S. kept classified by a secret government program for decades. Tonight, a world television exclusive you will only see on News Nation. Welcome to Elizabeth Vargas Reports, earning your trust every night. UFOs exist. The U.S. government found quite a number of them, and they are indeed of non-human origin. Those are the explosive allegations from a former intelligence officer tonight in a whistleblower complaint that the Inspector General is taking very seriously. 36-year-old Air Force veteran David Grush is exposing what he calls a top-secret military program that has reportedly found wreckage of fully intact UFOs. The government now calls them UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. For years, there have been whispers and rumors that the government had aircraft of non-human origin. This report is the first evidence it might be true. The Inspector General has called Grush's complaint urgent and credible. Tonight, we have a world television exclusive interview with the whistleblower in which he claims we not only have the aircraft, but the government has been keeping much of its secret from Congress and from the public. News Nation senior national
He claimed
correspondent
some
Brian Edgington is here
wild
with the story,
shit.
and this is a blockbuster.
It is a blockbuster. It's really hard to wrap your mind around this. I've been working on this for the past couple of weeks. I'm still having a hard time processing all of it. All over the last couple of years, it sort of became mainstream to discuss UFOs. The government has released videos. They've acknowledged that
Brian
we don't know what
Eden.
some of this stuff is out
I know
there that we
him.
have on camera, but this really takes it all to
He does a
another
lot of
level. For the very
true
first time, the
crime
world is about to hear from a former
reporting.
high-level U.S. intelligence officer who says the government has some of the unidentified craft in its possession. He is revealing these exclusive details about the secret government program.
We're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
We have all seen these blurry videos of unidentified flying objects. Video evidence, if you will, that old tales of UFOs may not all be conspiracy theories. In recent years, Congress starting an official U.S. government Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, recently renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. And now in a News Nation exclusive, David Grush, an Air Force veteran, former member of that task force, and veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, is formally blowing the whistle on secrets he says no one has ever shared publicly before.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the US defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
Grush sitting down with award-winning investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who's reporting for News Nation and has spent years reporting on the UFO question.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on the oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
Grush alleges the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft for decades. He's filed a whistleblower complaint saying he gave what he calls the classified proof to Congress and the intelligence community inspector general. News Nation has confirmed David Grush's credentials and resume. We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators. He says he can't show us the proof for national security reasons. He also tells us he's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself, but has talked extensively with other intelligence officials who have.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated
Is that supposed to be
disinformation campaign
shocking
targeting the U.S. populace, which
or a
is
surprise?
extremely unethical and immoral.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official
What?
intelligence representative at a high level from the
Government?
US government
The United
is
States
saying
government
publicly,
lies to its citizens?
we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone.
They don't tell us
Absolutely, the
everything?
data points
What?
empirically that we're not alone.
Whoa.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds,
You said the same thing at the trial.
it's true.
It's also harder for people to wrap their minds around the concept of a crashed object from somewhere else. It's easier to accept that, yeah, we see things in the sky that we can't explain.
Journalist Leslie Kane broke Grush's whistleblower story this morning in the debrief. Ms. Kane's career has been mainstream and credible, having written a series of reports on UFOs in the New York Times dating back to 2017. He has the credentials, but there's no documents that he's handed over. There's no pictures. And as a journalist, you want to see documents, you want to see pictures.
So I have a question for you guys. What do you think is worse? What would you find to be worse? Seeing what you believe is a UFO in the sky, but it turns out that you were just seeing shit. And it was like, I don't know, like a cloud or like something. And you were just like seeing, or maybe it wasn't even anything. And like your brain just made it up. Or seeing what you believe to be a UFO and you were actually correct. It actually was a UFO. And then you saw a UFO. Would you rather your brain trick you and you think it's a UFO but it wasn't? Or your brain be right? Or you be right about what you think you saw and you actually see a real UFO? What do you think is worse? Just curious. Just curious about your opinions about that. Something to think about. All right, where's this video? Come back to me. There you are.
Pictures. Does that raise a red flag?
Not at all, Brian. I mean, you mean documents that actually describe the craft?
Correct, yeah, like government documents, or to be able to see it for ourselves.
Of course, don't we all want that? And the problem with that is all of that information is classified. You know, as we said in the story, everything that Grush told Congress and told the Inspector General of both the IC, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and the Department of Defense Inspector General, all of that information is classified.
In 2017, Kane reported exclusively in the New York Times that the Pentagon had a secret UFO program. 3 years later, the Pentagon confirmed her story. Her latest report is even more explosive, but Kane says she has multiple sources who back up Grush's story.
I believe it because of all the sources I have who have told me the same thing. So who am I to doubt these very, very high-level people who have been inside these programs for decades, have done their work, and are all telling me the same thing? I mean, I don't think there's some kind of conspiracy among all these people who don't know each other to make something like this up.
So I've got to be blunt about this. You're not making this up. This is not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
And just within the last 10 minutes or so, the Pentagon has released a statement to News Nation about this report. They say to date, AARO has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. AARO is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. AARO, working with the Office of the General Counsel and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has established a safe and secure process for individuals to come forward with information to aid AARO in its congressionally mandated historical review. AARO's historical review of records and testimonies is ongoing and due to Congress by June 2024, and AARO welcomes the opportunity to speak with any former or current employee or contractor who believes they have information relevant to this historical review. And Elizabeth, we know that David Grush, he's filed that whistleblower complaint. He's been on the record under oath testifying to many of these things that he said in our report tonight.
Right, and it's important to point out that this statement from the Pentagon, from AARO, Grush is alleging that this top secret program is keeping it a secret from AARO.
Yeah, exactly. And if Grush is, what he's saying is true, you know, the spokespeople, all of those folks at that level wouldn't even know this was going on anyway.
All right, I got to ask you, you know, he has a compelling story to tell. Very little of it seems like firsthand knowledge. Isn't he just repeating what somebody else has told him or somebody else has showed him?
Yes, that is what he's doing, but he says he's talked to a number of people who are in very, very high level positions. He also had basically the highest level of classified material information that he was able to receive. We went back and checked over, you know, his history, all of his credentials, check out completely. Unfortunately, there's
in addition, a couple people have come forward publicly to vouch for him, people who are high ranking.
They have. And this article first came out this morning, and I think it's interesting that, you know, there hasn't been any sort of effort to discredit what he has said either from the Defense Department.
So interesting. So what happens, you know, and have we had any reaction, by the way, from members of Congress who have been taking this seriously in the last couple of years? We've seen congressional hearings. We've seen NASA's hearing just about a week ago on UFOs or UAPs, whatever.
Okay, fuck this. This is the news. Okay, hold on.
Up here is special guest Dan Evans with NASA. Hi, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
See what NASA says.
Very good. All right, so let's dive in here. What were the key takeaways from this panel? Are there UFOs out there?
It's a great question. Well, and first off, you cannot fail to be captivated by these military pilot accounts and videos of these seemingly mysterious objects.
I have a bad
shooting around
feeling about this NASA testimony.
What we're trying to do at NASA is to
interview.
get to the bottom of the mystery, and it's very clear to us that this isn't just a national security issue, but it's a scientific one also. So we brought in a team, an all-star panel of experts, and we asked them to look into these phenomena with a scientific lens. And while a small fraction of these events make you raise your eyebrows, all right, the main conclusion of the panel is that for the most part, we lack sufficient data to draw firm conclusions. So the main job
Oh,
of our
this is
group of
about
experts
something
is
else.
to advise us at NASA on how to develop a roadmap to get the data we need to resolve this issue once and for all.
The panel's chair this past week said they haven't found life beyond Earth yet. The yet is really sticking with me. Do you think there is a chance we will one day find life beyond Earth?
Well, Brett, I'm a scientist, and here's what I can tell you, that over the centuries and millennia that we've been doing astronomy, we've come to know the following, that here we are on Earth, which is a fairly ordinary rocky planet, believe it or not, that orbits a fairly standard star, which itself is located in a pretty average corner of a fairly average galaxy. That galaxy is one of probably 100 billion that we know. So is there life out there? Yes, but I want to say, well, at least yes, probably. I want to say though that life out there does not equate to we're being visited by aliens and UAPs are of alien origin. That's not what we're trying to say. We're trying to get to the bottom of this using science.
So what does that mean then? Life out there probably. What does that look like?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
You said there is life out there probably. We're not necessarily talking about aliens visiting us, but what do you mean then when you say life out there? What are you looking for?
So This is a little bit separate from our
As if
topic
he has the
of
fucking
UAPs, but
answers.
we're looking for signatures. We're looking for the characteristics of planets that orbit different stars that may actually be able to support life as we know it. So we're looking for what we call biomarkers and biosignatures, and NASA invests a huge.
But life as we know it, like, there is also life that has developed in ways that are unfamiliar to us. So, like, there are like crazy insects and creatures and things that have evolved and developed to live and survive in environments that we would have thought to be uninhabitable. Um, there are like bacterias and I don't know exactly what they're called. You know, there's little oh my god. Terrapoles. Teratods. Oh my god, you guys know what I'm talking about? That like little like weird like pig looking thing that like can survive in super freezing temperatures and then like super hot temperatures. And I don't think it needs air. They can live in like outer space. There's like animals that can live in like crazy caves that like have minimal amount of like oxygen and stuff. And then there's like crazy underwater creatures we don't even know about. So there could be life on planets that are not Earth-like, that, you know, develop and evolve to that specific planet's conditions. It doesn't just have like, I don't think life is just limited to our specific environment. I don't know. NASA to me about all of this seems a little fishy. I feel like the government is trying to keep them under control, like not allowing them to speak or say anything. NASA has eyes on like the entire sky, so they say. Like at all times, like cameras. So if this panel is telling the truth and these UFO and spacecraft alien sightings are common and regular, NASA should have a lot of photographical evidence. Photographical, I don't even know if that's a word. You guys know what I'm saying. Oh, 1 second. All right. Hold on, let me watch this video for a second.
And out of that mysterious close encounter, this object you see here was caught on camera flying past the SpaceX rocket just minutes after liftoff last week. Transportation correspondent Gio Benitez is tracking the story. Good morning, Gio.
Hey, George, good morning. Yeah, the internet lighting up with questions over this video. Did the object come from the rocket or from somewhere else? This morning, some possible answers. This morning, a potential close call caught on camera.
I hate
A
the fucking
mysterious
news.
object captured on tape flying very close to the SpaceX Crew Dragon with 4 astronauts on board.
Mission and liftoff.
Take a look at this video. Just 12 minutes after the astronauts left planet Earth Friday morning, part of the Falcon 9 rocket separates from the Dragon. That's when some kind of object flies between the two. Take a closer look in slow motion.
I can't even listen
But
to what they're
exactly
saying. My
was
brain
that
just, like,
object seen early in the flight? Sources
tunes it
telling
out.
us it appears to be ice from the liquid oxygen in that rocket. But this morning, no official confirmation on what it was.
The thing that makes me think that that is just most likely a piece of ice is that it happened right at the time where they were inserted into orbit.
Lots of hugs and smiles right now.
In the end, the astronauts arriving safely at the International Space Station over the weekend to begin their 6 months of research. And back here live at the Intrepid Museum in New York, we've got the Space Shuttle Enterprise right behind me. This actually played a huge role in understanding ice buildup during the shuttle days. Now, this video may do the same, and SpaceX will likely look at it frame by frame, Robin.
Sounds good. All right, Gio, thank you. Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go.
You could imagine in 4 and 5D space where
before rotating back to Washington.
I was an intel officer for the U.S. for 14 years. My last position, which I left in April of 2023, I co-led the UAP portfolio for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and some of the highest officials within the Department of Defense and intelligence community used to call on me to advise them on some of the hardest target sets that the country had.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the US defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
And he says the most earth-shattering of those secrets were revealed after 2019, when he was invited to join the UAP task force. You had the security classifications to go anywhere and ask anyone anything.
I had, based on my formal security clearance and multiple polygraphs, I had the ability to be read into any program that I needed. At one point in time, I was extremely highly cleared.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me. They were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
You are alleging that the US government has been concealing the existence on this planet of alien life.
I would couch it as non-human intelligence, NHI, like we would like to say in our language.
Why do you say that? Why do you say NHI?
I don't want to necessarily denote origin. I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location. And I couch it as somebody who studied physics where maybe they're coming from a different physical dimension as described in quantum mechanics. We know there's extra dimensions due to high energy particle collisions, et cetera. And there's a theoretical framework to explain that. Yeah.
Just let me cut to the quick though. You're saying there is an intelligent species engaging with this planet.
Yes, that's potentially extraterrestrial. Yeah.
I speak for everybody sitting at home. That is a shock.
It was to me. And I had a lot of sleepless nights.
Grush says he's never personally seen non-human intelligence, but he's spoken to enough people directly involved in what he calls the program that he's convinced it's real.
I started out as a non-believer. I came to the problem as a hardcore physics guy, intel officer. So I have a, excuse my language, high factor. I was very methodical, interviewing people who didn't know each other, making sure this wasn't some kind of cover-up of some other program.
He says he pressed to gain direct access to this program, and that's when his trouble started. Grush claims his investigation was stymied, his requests for access rebuffed.
They shut the door in my face. They denied me access to these programs.
Soon after, he says, he endured reprisals and retaliation from above. He then reported that information to the Intelligence Community Inspector General. That's why he's filed this whistleblower complaint. He says that experience is why he decided to go public here and in a recent article written by Leslie Kane in The Debrief. You're not being paid for this interview?
No, I'm not.
Why are you doing this?
It's a sense of service, you know, call me a Boy Scout or whatever. It just, when I saw the kind of wrongdoing I did, I don't want to be 60, 70 years old in the future and have that, you know, coulda, shoulda, woulda kind of feeling where I could have made a difference. I do not want to live a life of regret.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the US government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone.
He's saying more than that. So he said that he knows people personally that have been physically hurt or injured, attacked, or like put in danger basically by both officials in his like agency and extraterrestrials, including knowing someone personally. He didn't like straight out said this, but he basically said it, knowing somebody who was murdered. He didn't say whether by aliens or the agencies, but he said he knows somebody personally who was murdered for speaking out about this. So I guess that has to be, you know, agencies, not aliens. But he also said that him and his wife witnessed aggressive behavior from extraterrestrials that he considers a security threat, and he called it disturbing, very disturbing. That's some crazy shit. That is some crazy shit. Like, what did he see? What did he see an alien do? What physical harm did he see an extraterrestrial do to somebody he knows personally that he considers aggressive, disturbing behavior that is a threat to national security? And his wife saw it too, which is weird because it's not like she would be on the job with him, right? So it's like, are they following him because he's seen shit? Crazy.
Oh, absolutely. The data points empirically that we're not alone. Yeah.
You've said that the United States has spacecraft, intact craft.
We do.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, It's true.
Have you seen spacecraft?
I've seen some interesting photos and I've read some very interesting reports.
But he says the specific documents and photos that would prove his claims are still classified, and he cannot disclose them here.
Let's deal with the issue of your credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we believe you? You're just somebody coming out of nowhere, making claims that we really ultimately can't prove.
Yeah. Well, we provided the proof internally to the Inspector General and the Hill staff. We went into all the details. I mean, I have the credentials. I was an intelligence officer on the UAP task force.
But let's face it, allegations of aliens and their spacecraft are hard to accept, even coming from a respected insider. Even if you call them NHI and UAP, how could such NHI travel to Earth in the first place and go undetected by the general public? Grush says the craft may not be traveling through space as we understand it.
It is a well-established fact, at least mathematically and based on empirical observation and analysis, that there most likely are physical additional spatial dimensions. You could imagine in 4 and 5D space where what we experience as linear time ends up being a physical dimension in higher dimensional space, where if you were living there, you could translate across what we perceive as a linear flow. So there is a possibility that, and this is a theory here, I'm not saying this is 100% the case, but it could be that this is not necessarily extraterrestrial and it's actually coming from a higher dimensional physical space that might be co-located, right here.
What can you tell me about these craft, these technologies? Why do you know it's exotic?
Based on the very specific properties that I was briefed on, isotopic ratios that would have to be engineered for it to be at those levels, but also just extremely strange, heavy atomic metal, high up in the periodic table arrangements that we don't understand, what the emergent properties are, but there's just a very strange mix of elements.
So you're absolutely sure that the materials that these craft are made of are clearly not of this Earth?
Yeah, they're sophisticatedly engineered, certainly not by humans.
And while Grush says the US has gleaned some insight from these materials for military use, so much more could be done if academia and the private sector had access.
It's totally nuts that humanity as a whole, especially the U.S. citizenry as a whole, they're not even benefiting from broad research on this to solve propulsion, energy issues, novel material science that can improve people's quality of life. It's just totally nuts how it's been protected and inhibits progress.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
Coming up, how long has this been going on?
A lot of the things I was briefed on were very shocking.
So let's start from the very beginning. You say it's a 90-year cover-up.
Just about, yeah.
90 years.
1933 was the first recovery in Europe, in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle.
It's long been known that the regime of dictator Benito Mussolini documented numerous UAP during this time. This internal memo from the Italian secret services includes crude drawings of the UAPs.
It's true. It's real.
Yeah, that actually happened. The Italian government moved it to a secure air base in Italy for the rest of kind of the fascist regime until 1944, 1945. And, the Pope Pius XII back-channeled that.
So the Vatican was involved?
Yeah, and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it.
So let me be very clear about this. You're saying that the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they know about the existence of non-human intelligence on this planet?
Certainly.
Grush says shortly after the dawn of the atomic age, another major crash recovery took place.
I'm not surprised
You've
about
probably heard of
that.
it.
What can you tell me about the Roswell craft?
Fortunately, those details were not approved for me to talk about right now.
This much we know. In 1947, an object crashed in the New Mexico desert near the town of Roswell. The Air Force recovered material described as metallic and rubbery, though the government changed its story as to what it was, calling it a flying disc at first, then a weather or spy balloon.
It just read ridiculous to me that the US Air Force had changed its story.
Yeah, and they added additional elements over time and tried to conflate additional programs to explain some of the events.
Why are these things crashing?
Yeah, some are landed, some are crashed. And I think that's an interesting discussion that's come up, as advanced as, we are, as humans, right? Planes crash, cars crash. Just because you're some advanced sentience that has advanced technology doesn't mean some small percentage of your, I'll use the Air Force term like sorties, meet an unfortunate operational conclusion, as we might want to say.
Most people would tell you the Roswell incident has been thoroughly debunked. In fact, the Air Force published this report in 1994 to put the issue to rest once and for all. Grush has read it.
That analysis I did was a total hack job. And even anybody with analytical skills, if you read it, you can deduce that they're conflating multiple situations with crash test dummies and mogul balloons. And they're just saying that the townsfolk who personally witnessed it were totally imagining things. They concocted that whole report just to disinform.
So the reason for the secrecy exactly is what?
Feudalistic dominance, who can have both asymmetric technology for, it seems like, just fueling the war machine.
Grush says that through the 50s and 60s, encounters with the NHI continued, as did the cover-up. One incident in 1967, about which multiple Air Force veterans have gone public, involved UAPs tampering with the nuclear missiles at Malmstrom Air Base in Montana.
They saw a craft, appearing to be intelligently controlled, hovered over a nuclear weapons silo and shut down 10 nuclear ICBM missiles.
Mm-hmm. It certainly looks like they want to understand how far we've advanced in our nuclear fizzle kind of technologies at the very least. I mean, it looks like preparatory probing activity. It might be innocent kind of scientific gathering, could be ISR probing.
Meanwhile, Grush says the crash retrieval program continued. And while he won't reveal where the downed craft are stored, he does say that the people working with the technology have been putting themselves at risk.
A lot of them, were injured looking at some of this stuff. You can imagine the nuclear, radiological, and biological risk looking at an unknown. And a lot of them have literally suffered physically because of their service.
But as we know, anyone who's come forward claiming non-human intelligence is behind these incidents has been dismissed as delusional or deliberately deceitful.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
Coming up, 120 miles from the west. New evidence and perhaps new attitudes in a new age of UAPs.
The American people need and deserve to know more.
Has the U.S. government changed its tune? These are the videos that started it all. Footage captured by naval aviators on military-grade cameras that defied all prosaic explanation. Dave Grush has investigated this one, shot in 2015 off the East Coast by fighter pilots from the USS Theodore Roosevelt.
There's an industry of debunkers out there on the web who say, oh, they've got this all wrong. It's a jet exhaust at a distance and the aircraft's turning. Give me an answer on that.
I had some optical engineering experts look at that and the Raytheon AT FLIR system based on the pixel saturation and apparent size. It's certainly something that's not a jet. It might be some kind of natural phenomenon that's quite strange, but it's not as simple as a jet.
He has even stronger opinions about this UAP, now known to history as the Tic Tac, shot in 2004 in the Pacific by aviators off the USS Nimitz.
And the Tic Tac?
Truly anomalous, absolutely technical vehicle, physical, and that's absolutely something that we didn't make.
Not of this world.
Most likely, yeah.
The videos were leaked in 2017, then officially released by the Pentagon in 2020. At the time, it seemed the Pentagon may have finally abandoned its obsession with secrecy and decided to do what other countries have been doing for decades.
Right?
Establish a properly funded, publicly accountable team to investigate reports of UAP. Dave Grush was part of that team.
This is a hunt mission for what might somebody be doing in our backyard that we don't know about.
The task force set about investigating these incidents, including more recent events like the odd encounters that took place during naval exercises in 2019 off the coast of San Diego. This video, shot on the USS Omaha and later leaked to documentarian Jeremy Corbell, has received particular attention.
It either zooms off so fast you can't see it or it sinks into the ocean, but it seems to drop What do you know about it?
It was truly anomalous.
But Grush says the promised new age of government transparency is a fallacy. For starters, he says the videos that have been released are just the tip of the iceberg.
There are many videos that are totally fair to release through a declassification process. And I find it very concerning from a transparency perspective that all that the department has declassified were those 3 famous videos. There are more concerning videos that left me with a lot of questions, yeah.
He says there are credible witnesses who could testify to Congress about spacecraft, big spacecraft.
A lot of them were very large, yeah. Like a football field kind of size. And I remember interviewing these personnel. I'm like, either these people are lying to me or having a psychotic break, or this is some crazy but true stuff that's happening. And I have no good explanation that's prosaic at all for this, because this is not explainable by, swamp gas. St. Elmo's fire, ball lightning, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is like tangible technical craft they're seeing up close and personal in some cases when I interview people.
And at the centre of it all, the crash retrieval program the government has never publicly acknowledged. A program, Grush says, that's included at least one private aerospace company that is storing alien craft. Is that true?
That is how a lot of these relationships are. While I don't want to name the specific companies and government elements, but overall, the government has been the custodian of a lot of this, right? And they'll hand receipt it out to a cleared defense contractor to do some analysis, which I find highly unethical. You have basically a sole source arrangement, and you allow certain private corporate elements to look at this, develop a potential insight, and then sell it back to the government for profit. And I think that's totally unethical.
The problem you've got is there have been categorical denials from high-level officials in the US government, even presidents, that what you're saying is true.
Unfortunately, some elected officials were not brought in.
Only a few weeks ago, 19th of April, the head of the Pentagon's UAP investigations program, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, told Congress AARO, that's the Pentagon's UFO investigation body, has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics.
While a large number of cases in our holdings remain technically unresolved, this is primarily due to a lack of data associated with those cases.
Was that a lie?
Well, I know Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I've known him for about 8 years. And, I expressed some concerns to Dr. Kirkpatrick about a year ago and told him what I was starting to uncover. And he didn't follow up with me. And he has my phone number. He could have called me. I hope he ultimately does the right thing. He should be able to make the same investigative discoveries I did. It's totally crazy if he doesn't.
So the implication here is that the head of the very body that Congress has ordered to tell the American public the truth about UAPs is possibly misleading the American public. Do you think the American public is being lied to?
Well, they've been lied to over the years, and I'm hoping that the lies stop.
Coming up, it gets even scarier. The UFO whistleblower says the NHIs aren't all friendly.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
And guess who they might be working with?
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this. And it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long.
The common interpretation from some commentators is that there is a non-human species and it's incredibly benevolently well disposed to the human race.
Yeah, and I think that is the logical fallacy there is because they're advanced, they're kind. We'll never really understand full intent in that because we're not them, whatever them is or are. But I think what appears to be malevolent activity has happened based on not only nuclear site probing activities, witness testimony. I think at least if we look at it through a humanistic lens, it does appear negative, at least to us.
I've been told that there have been attempts to bring down craft, that we've acted offensively against non-human craft.
There have been instances, and there are certain techniques.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
Now I'm scared. People have just heard you say non-humans may well have murdered human beings.
That seems to be the case at one point, yeah.
And there's more. Grush says the United States is not the only country that's encountered NHI and their technology. He says our geopolitical rivals have their own crash retrieval programs, which they are also secretly exploiting for military purposes.
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this. And it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long. And, there's no good way to level the playing field and hold other nation states accountable if they're doing unethical or illicit activity as it relates to the subject. And I think the obtuse and it is so destabilizing.
You say there's been a Cold War behind the scenes with Russia and China.
There has been a Cold War with our peer adversaries, yeah.
Why hasn't Russia or China come out and spoken publicly about this?
I think they're in a similar, pickle as us, where it's they understand maybe some of the socioeconomic destabilization factors in their own society.
But if this non-human intelligence is so advanced, and at least some of them are malevolent, why haven't they destroyed us already? Perhaps some fragile yet combustible détente has been reached. Grush has written an internal document about his discoveries that refers to agreements that risk putting our future in jeopardy.
That's
what it's quite clear that you're talking about agreements between America and non-human intelligences. Have we made agreements with non-human intelligences?
I bet it's
That's the kind of information I really hope national
long
leadership
time.
is able to get to the bottom of.
I need to pin you down on this. Are there agreements between non-human intelligences and the American government?
I think that's a question that I would like to know all the details of as well.
We do know of at least one agreement among humans that's worth noting. This 1971 agreement between the US and the USSR on measures to reduce the risk of nuclear war. Whether or not you believe Dave Grush, this document proves the two superpowers were aware that UAP existed, whatever they were.
If you look at Article 3 of that treaty, it talks about unidentified objects near nuclear facilities or interfering with communications. And that is a treaty that has been used, from what I understand, to notify each other if there's a concerning event.
And that's a way of saying to the Russians, hey, don't shoot at us. It's not us.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a concern because of the secrecy. There is an environment where you could have almost like a false flag, where true non-prosaic UAP situation could be contrived as a provocation of something from a nation state, and we want to de-escalate that.
If this is true, if the stakes are so high, if the fate of the human race is at stake, perhaps it's no surprise to hear Grush say the US government will do anything to keep these secrets safe.
Can I put it to you that crimes must have been committed?
At the very least, I saw substantive evidence that white-collar crime was committed.
Have people been killed to protect this secret?
Based on the people I talked to, that was an ongoing concern. Yeah, unfortunately, I've heard some really un-American things I don't want to repeat right now.
So you have a strong suspicion that people have been murdered to protect
That's as
the
American as it gets.
Coming up, a reality check.
Is it possible that you're deluding yourself?
It's time to put our whistleblowers' credibility to the test.
Everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. They're going, is this guy for real?
Let's talk about what Dave Grush doesn't have. He doesn't have smoking gun documents or photos. He doesn't have official confirmation of his claims. He's just a guy talking on camera, and a lot of his answers to our most pointed questions sound like this.
Can you comment?
Unfortunately, I cannot.
So who is this guy really?
I don't want fame or fortune. I'm just here to provide public leadership on an issue that I uncovered, and I thought it was totally outrageous.
NewsNation has confirmed through multiple sources that Dave Grush is who he says he is, an Air Force veteran from Pittsburgh who worked in military intelligence and was part of the UAP task force. Maybe he's just a confident, well-spoken ex-military intelligence officer who just happens to have lost his mind.
Do you have any kind of mental illness?
No.
Have you ever had a psychosis, a delusion?
No.
Is there anything
So
in
sick
your
of
medical
being asked
history
these
that might be
questions.
capable of being interpreted as a reason why you might be confabulating, making things up?
No, I'm not a disgruntled employee. I resigned on my own accord because I thought altruistically it's more appropriate to show thought leadership on the outside on this now, because I hit an impasse within the government to try to right this wrong.
So I've got to be blunt about this.
Yeah.
You're not making this up. This is
No.
not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
You've told us that we really are not alone. Even though you believe what you say is true, you haven't been fed disinformation. It's a common thing in intelligence for governments to mislead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very sensitive to that fact. Was this some kind of ruse against me? Am I being used in any kind of way? And I took about 4 years being very methodical before I filed my whistleblower complaint to be absolutely certain of these basic facts.
So take me through the process of how you convinced yourself that this is real.
Well, based on the credential people that came to me, some of these subjects provided me sensitive foreign intelligence to read, sensitive program documents and photographs to evaluate, and then described in very specific detail how all this worked. And they were telling me the exact extremely specific details that it all checked out. Yeah.
You know, the thing I have trouble with, it's the fact that my experience as a journalist is it's very hard for governments to keep secrets. Most things leak.
Mm-hmm.
Your government leaks like a sieve.
Mm-hmm.
Why hasn't this leaked?
Well, I've certainly been the recipient of a lot of U.S. government secrets, and I can tell you they've never seen the light of day. That's for sure. And I guess ostensibly this has leaked like a sieve for decades, but it was a very sophisticated disinformation campaign where they have allowed some of the truth to come out through some of their trade crafts, but they've disenfranchised people, they've stigmatized it, they made it like a total wacky thing to talk about. So anybody who may come forward with that kind of information is looked like a total tinfoil hat guy, because it's a perfect amalgamation of disinformation to just make it look crazy.
The best reason to believe Dave Grush may be this document. Remember that whistleblower complaint he filed? It would seem it hasn't fallen on deaf ears.
So the Inspector General of the Intelligence Services of the United States has the information you've got?
Yes.
I don't know. I believe him. I believe him. That was pretty much the full interview.
By your colleagues and your peers. Right. It's very like that in a newsroom. I mean, he's exposed himself to the risk of indefinite time.
It's the same interview.
Guys, they're saying, trust us, we're the great United States. We know what's best for all of you guys. Sure, there may be technologies here that can be recovered.
I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see.
And, I'm curious, it's been a few days since the hearings. Pilots feel comfortable coming to you and your organization. Have you seen an increase in people coming forward with stories? Have you come forward, especially as a member of the military, and speak publicly about seeing a UFO? Our next guest, Ryan Graves, testified at Wednesday's hearings. You saw him there about what he saw while piloting an F-18. And he's been instrumental in encouraging other pilots to speak out. Ryan joins me live now. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Ryan. I'm curious, it's been a few days since the hearings. Pilots feel comfortable coming to you and your organization. Have you seen an increase in people
totally
coming forward with stories? Have you heard anything especially interesting in the last couple of days?
Absolutely, you're correct. So yeah, since the hearing, there have been an influx of people coming to safeaerospace.org and joining both as pilots, as people just want to support this conversation. And a lot of those pilots have shared their stories. There have been a number of commercial pilots that have recently signed up that have been confirming some of the sightings that I spoke about, as well as sharing some new data about potentially some new cases. So we certainly have a work cut out for us.
An interesting development since the hearings, Ryan, is the Arrowhead, Dr. Kirkpatrick, coming forward with this statement that I just read a couple of minutes ago, really not happy about the hearings, calling out David Grush. Did that surprise you? What did you make of that? Like, here's the statement again, saying that he was deeply disappointed. Were you surprised to see him come out with that statement on his LinkedIn?
Well, disappointed to
I'm deeply disappointed at the denigration, the denigration. Sorry, I was so bad at spelling and pronunciation, all that. The denigration of arrows, dedicated men and women hailing from the Department of Defense intelligence community and civil partners who are pouring their hearts out working this issue on behalf of Congress. Finally, to be clear, Arrow has yet to find any credible evidence to support the allegations of any reverse engineering program for non-human technology. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, Director, All Domain Anonymly. Why can't I say that? Anonymously. I think I gotta go soon. Starting to get loopy. Anomaly Resolution Office, Arrow. Okay, so All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. All Domain Anomaly Resolution. That's a very like gaslighty title for an organization. All Domain Anomaly. It's like anomalies that they are declaring are all domain, unless it's just meant to be like within Earthbound. Maybe like they don't resolve cases outside of Earth. All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, because it's resolvable clearly. I love how the one NASA guy was like, we will get to the bottom of this once and for all. I'm like, I think we're just scratching the surface.
See him come out that way. I would be disappointed to hear if he thought that hearing in any way was a slight on any of the men or women that were serving under Arrow or that he's worked with. I don't think anyone would speak poorly to any of that staff. I think there is perhaps justification for calling out improvement to the Office of Arrow or their processes that they've demonstrated thus far. So I hope that message got through clearly.
I'm just curious. You've been outspoken. You've done a lot of interviews over the years.
Oh,
What
is
did it feel
Arrow a
like,
good thing?
testifying there in Congress? Did it feel? I mean, you've told the story many times, but did it feel different being under oath and on the record? I mean, it was obviously just such a historic moment.
Never mind. Sorry if Arrow is a
Yeah,
positive
it's
thing.
very difficult to describe it. It was quite the experience. Even just from the moment we opened the back doors and came out, I honestly kind of lost my breath for a moment. But sitting there, it was something that I had spoken to before,
That
and
was
for me, it
surreal.
was a story that I had considered for a while, and it was nothing but the truth. So for me to be under oath in a way was almost empowering, that I could show people that I was being as honest as I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Gaetz, you heard him talk about a UAP incident at.
All right, so this is a little bit off topic, but see how he said that? It was empowering being under oath and being able to share his truth. That is how I feel like even though it's hard for him, hard for them, or anyone, most people for that matter, to go up and like testify and or be a witness and share your truth, whether it be at a hearing, in a trial. If you know you're telling the truth, I feel like as long as it's, I mean, there's obviously certain cases that this won't apply to, but I feel like it would, as like a victim or someone who's been done wrong and wants justice, I feel like it would be, like he said, almost empowering. Not easy, not fun, but empowering to go under oath and finally share your truth and prove your case to the world or to the jury or to whoever, and share your side, your truth. If you're telling the truth, I feel like that would be empowering for you to get that moment. And again, I'm not saying it wouldn't be difficult or even traumatic, but like, I don't know. Okay, so to wrap this around, like in the Amber Johnny Depp trial, like Amber said it was like the hardest thing she's ever been through, you know, besides all the abuse and rape and all that. Sharing her truth, you know, to the world. I just feel like, for me, I just feel like, yeah, that would be really difficult and hard. But like, I almost feel like she's kind of lucky because, like, most victims and most people who deserve justice don't get that chance to go up in front of the entire world and expose their abuser and share their truth. I just think it was so hard for her because she wasn't telling the truth. And now, of course, there are people who actually are telling the truth and who still aren't believed. And that's got to be the hardest of all. But I think, I don't know, in that way, it can be empowering being able to go under oath and share your truth and expose the unjust that has been done upon you. Anyways, that was so off topic. But just when he said that, I was like, yeah, that's, I don't know. That's what I thought of.
Eglin Air Force Base said he saw a radar image, now wants that image to be released, is asking for a subpoena to force them to release that image. Does that sound at all like what you saw? What do you make of Representative Gates' story about what happened at the base there?
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. It actually did remind me very much of the fleet of objects that was seen in the vicinity of the gimbal incident. That was something that wasn't seen on the FLIR footage, but was seen on the radar data on the situational awareness page, and you can hear the pilot speak to it. Well, when Representative Gates spoke to that particular incident in Florida, it reminded me of the same
Don't even
incident.
speak to the
What
extraterrestrial.
was even more interesting is just how positive the congressman was that what he had seen an image was not ours.
One thing I wondered too, I heard David Grush say over and over again, you know, there was confidential information that he could only talk about with them in a skiff in a you know, confidential environment. Is there stuff that you know and saw that you're not able to talk about, or because it was sort of a firsthand account when you were piloting the F-18, it's all just open to the public?
When I first testified to my case and I spoke about it behind closed door, there was classified information relating to our weapons and sensor ranges that would be considered classified now. However, there would be no information related to UAP or related to the security classification guidelines, or defined through the security classification guidelines specifically for UAP themselves. So I was never read into any classified UAP program or anything like that, like Mr. Grush's experience.
Makes sense. Well, Ryan, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. It was really something to see you testifying on Wednesday. Hopefully you've gotten a little bit of rest, although it seems like you work all the time. Thanks so much for coming on with us tonight.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you for watching. Go to
All right, I think I'm gonna end it here. It's been a long stream, so thanks for watching some of it or watching along if you've seen any of this, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Mwah. Bye-bye.